Hey, well, welcome to Trucking TV. My name's Chris Gosling, and we're off on one of our regular chit-chats, I guess you'd call it. I don't know whether you call it a chit-chat or whether you call it a news show, because things aren't very newsy, as you know. The run-up to Christmas is always a peculiar time of the year, I guess. What we say here is that we'll bring you what we get and see what interesting stuff we have. First things first. The driver poll. Did you take part in the driver poll? I loved it because it was really interesting from my point of view, just to do a little snap, let's say, and see what people said. The results are in, and here's a little picture for you. There you go. We had a very curious result, which is in fact around 50%, 51% of people said, would they pick driving as a career again? No, they wouldn't. And 49 said yes, they would. So that's I find that fascinating because it just kind of proves the point. And we can say now that it's a straight 50-50 punt, really. You know, the truth is that if you are looking at the driving population now, we're going to do a bit more on this tomorrow, I think. The driving population now is ageing. And people who come into driving probably have more choices than people used to have. I don't know whether that's true or not. But the reality seems to me to be that drivers who come in to the truck driving business now really have a choice of getting in and getting out, because you can get the same money, more money or less money in a lot of places, because driving is no longer really very well paid. And let's face it, you can get the same money working for some warehouse company where you go home at 6 o'clock every night. Maybe you don't make as much every week, but maybe you make as enough to live on, and maybe you make a better life for yourself. So that, I think, is a really interesting one. That little poll, we'll do a few more polls like that. If you have something you want to find out for what other drivers think, then I'm very happy to hear from you. So by all means, get in touch. You know that I like to hear from you anyway, because the more you tell me, the more I know and the more I can spread around. So that's an interesting one, and we will be using this poll result after Christmas, I think, soon after Christmas, and telling the world that actually, guys, not only are you 50,000 drivers short of the 350,000 drivers that are actually operating the UK, maybe half of them would like to say stuff your job. So there you go. It's an interesting one, isn't it? And I don't know how companies will respond to that. It's a really interesting one, I have to say. Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm just taking a look at some of the page input, because to be honest with you, I've been quite busy this afternoon, so I haven't had enough looks at the page to keep me right up to date. Someone, Dave Brandt, what a nice bloke you are, Dave. Heavens. Informative and interesting when it comes to UK haulage and transport industry. Ah, well, that's very nice. I try and do my best, Dave. Thank you very much, I have to say. Darren says, what does Darren say? Yeah. The trouble, we find a lot of older drivers don't need the hustle of doing DCPC, and they have better private pension, so don't need to work till 65 and leave earlier. I think that's a bloody good point, actually, Darren. It's I quit as early as I could. I have to say, I quit work a long time ago, and a long time before the pensionable age, and I didn't have a pension, but I kept doing stuff that just made a living, and quit on the formal career thing, because let's be honest, do you bloody need it? Good evening, Martin. Nice to see you there. Let's just go and have a look at something else. Now, this is, as you know, we get, I think, quite a lot of stuff coming through. There we go. One of the things that I wanted to share with you again, evening, Dean, one of the things I wanted to share with you again is this thing about crime. We talk about crime all the time here, and at Christmas, crime goes down, I think, because people, A, don't report it. It doesn't happen so much because the criminals don't have time to sell the product before Christmas, possibly. And I don't know what else happens, but the truth is that we've read very few crime reports over the last day, 2 days. So in reality, what do? Well, we can't report any crime. We can't report hotspots. But if you tell us anything, then we will come on with it and we'll tell you what's happening as far as we see it. Don't forget, you can get in touch with us anytime via Trucking TV. You can also get in touch with me anytime via TTV Road Transport Crime Reports, and that's a separate group that you can belong to. You're hugely welcome to belong to that. And today we had a piece from a gentleman called Jay, who works from a company called Bluestone Transport. Now, this is not up-to-date news. This is back in October, but I thought it was worth showing you. Here we go. This is some photographs that Jay and his colleagues took, and this includes their yard and depot. It includes the vehicles, and he was gobsmacked. I think Jay was actually gobsmacked, and I was delighted that he sent this through to me because it shows what's happening. Bluestone Transport is not an immense company, it's a small company. They had 4 hits from criminals in the course of a month. Not just slash curtains, they actually had one vehicle was actually stolen and used in another crime. And I asked Jay specifically about the response he got from the police, and I was delighted to say that he got a good response from the police. He actually said that, well, they couldn't do enough for us, really. They got one truck back that had been stolen, they got some of the cargo back, and so we have to lift our hats occasionally to the police and say, you did a good job and found the gear, mate. The reality, I think, on this kind of stuff, it's difficult to say. I don't want to have a go at the police because I think they do the best with what they've got. The truth is, of course, that money is constantly short for the cops, and I think they would do a better job if they had more dosh. We did hear the other day also from Chippenham, from Chippenham Pit Stop, and they said that they hadn't had a great deal stolen, but they had more curtain slashes, we know from a couple of reports. But another driver came up online today and said, well, I was up at about 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, doing my checks, and there were a couple of coppers walking around the site, which I think is really reassuring for guys. I think that's something, to be truthful, that's something we need to see. We need to see policemen out doing that job so that they can keep an eye on what's happening in our world. Goodness me. Okay, what's next? Well, the next thing, let's just go back to those photographs. I just want to make one more point on that, and let's just sort out my button presses. Okay, the point to make here is really that this is a small company. This is a small company, and these guys lost one vehicle for X amount of time. I don't know, probably a day or 2 or 3. They had a hit on the insurance for the truck and the cargo. They had hits on the insurance, as you can see, for the building. Doesn't that look bloody awful? They had hits for the fuel thefts. So the reality for these guys is it's not just about being hit by crime. For a smaller company, it's about the rest of the stuff. It's the rest of the stuff that comes on from crime. You don't just get the crime, you get the problems that relate to it. So that's why we've got to keep reporting, even curtain slashes, anything. You need to report really to the police. Tell the police, tell your boss, tell us if you can, because we would love to hear about it, and we'll collate the numbers and see what results we get. Because as I said the other night, if we're getting loads and loads of curtain slashes, not many thefts, the curtain slashes don't seem to get reported much. So let's say right now that we need to get those curtain slashes recorded somewhere. And if we end up recording it, then I'll be really delighted. I'm just trying to work out which button to press. Okay, so let's close that thing down and just get to the next item. There we go. What have we got next? Well, there's one more thing I want to mention to you. And this is one that I put on the website, on the Tracking TV website. Let me just wave a little flag at people. Good evening to you, Dave. Nice to see you. And Dean, you wonder if companies or the police check online sites like eBay? Well, that's a good question. The last story which Jay sent to us from Bluestone Transport, that was interesting because he said in a note we had from him that the police not only tracked down the vehicles, but they did track down a house where goods were being sold from. So I think, yes, I think they do look, but I think it helps if we look too and we talk to the police, or you in this case. Drivers, if you see something that makes you suspicious, I think you should phone the law. There you go. I think that would be a good thing to do. Okay, on to the next one. What have we got here? This is an interesting one. I put this story up on the paper and the website today, and this is from a very well-respected online newsletter. If you don't read it, it may be a worthwhile read if you're interested and if you've got time. They are saying, let's just go and have a look at the story itself. The UK haulage industry is likely to become more concentrated in the hands of fewer operators. Now that's a really interesting one. Where do we go with this one? I have to say that if I were a driver these days, I would find this quite concerning, because big companies tend to exert pressure on their employees and try and push down wages. As we all know, some of the bigger companies are some of the poorer payers. Some of the smaller companies pay relatively well, especially when they're working in specialist trades where they need drivers who know what they're about. It's a really, really interesting question, isn't it? Because we also know that the big operators, because they have a wider spread of activities, they have more trucks, and in reality they have more oomph for buying stuff like diesel, and for buying stuff like insurance, and for buying vehicles. They actually get a better deal all the way down the line than smaller companies. They also have jobs, so in reality they to some degree control the wage structures for drivers. So it's an interesting one. If this story is right, and larger companies increasingly take over the industry, then that's bad news for smaller operators and potentially bad news for drivers. What can you say to that one? I find that quite bothering, really, because I think that drivers in general currently aren't well regarded by their employers. Going back to the other thing, I'd like to go back to one thing that's down this page a bit, that's in this story. Take a look at this. And this is talking about the driver shortage. Apparently the average age of UK HGV drivers is currently 55 years old, which means that in 10 years, or maybe a bit longer, almost definitely a bit longer, those drivers will be gone. They won't be in the industry anymore. They'll take retirement, snatch it with both hands, I should think. The cost of obtaining a C+E licence is reaching £3,000. And an estimated 45,000 drivers are required to sustain the industry. Well, if you were a young guy, we go back to the earlier point, if you were a young guy looking for a job, would you choose to drive a truck? Do you have £3,000 in money if you're on pretty low wages, let's say 8 or 9 quid an hour? Do you have a spare £3,000 to put into getting an HGV licence, in the sure and certain knowledge that you ain't going to earn any more because you got it? That's the interesting one, isn't it? I find that really quite bothering. I think that's a worrying point. Let's go down. There was another comment I wanted to say, and I've lost it. Oh no. Okay, never mind. So there you go. That's that point. I do think that from the employer's point of view, sooner or later they're gonna have to bite this bullet of the spare 3,000 quid. Trevor, I take your point. No one has got spare 3,000 quid. What? Not if you're not going to get a benefit out of it. The truth is, if you're a young guy, let's say you're working in a warehouse, and you look at truck drivers going by, and you talk to them maybe, and they say, well, it's not a bad life really, because you get about, you see the countryside, I have to say, I haven't driven a truck for bloody hell 50 years. Yeah. But when I was doing it for 2 or 3 years, I thoroughly enjoyed going to different places. I was a young guy. I enjoyed going to different places. I had a really interesting time, and I enjoyed it. And back then, the wages weren't any greater than working in a warehouse. But now, if I was working in a warehouse, I'd be going home every night, see the missus. If I had a family, see the kids. If I was a single guy, I'd be going out with my mates. What do you know? If you're a young guy, are you going to say, yeah, all right, I'll pay 3,000 quid to earn the same wages doing something different? I don't know if you would. Yeah, no, I'm going to go with you on that one. Let's just have a look at that. Russell Morgan says, I got a job to pay for mine, call me old-fashioned. Yeah, I think you're right. So what have other people said? Well, Jonathan Bethel says, yeah, shelf stackers get more than truck drivers. Can be true, can't it? A friend of mine, or a guy I knew, worked overnights in Tesco's as a shelf stacker, and he did bloody well. And he got a discount on product as well. What more can you ask? He went home every morning, had the evening with the kids, went into work later. No problem. He had a nice life from his point of view. Personally, I wouldn't want to do it, but there you go. But not nice. But so what does Trevor says? Well, Trevor says, yeah, you do that job and you haven't got the hassle truck drivers have got. I think that's true too. I think the issue now. Can we talk about this one seriously and say that the issue now is that truck drivers have to have qualifications. They need to get a license which costs £3,000. They have to have other qualifications and other knowledge to actually do the job. And truck driving is not a job that you can say, oh, I've got a driving license, I'll go and do that. Hasn't been for many years, but the reality is that the demands made on truck drivers are greater and greater than they are on guys who work in warehouses, guys who work in factories. You don't need to have all the knowledge that a truck driver needs to do the job. So maybe it's time that employers, and also the state perhaps, acknowledged this and said, you know, we need to actually up the ante on what we call truck drivers' skill levels. I was talking to a nice lady at a job centre the other day because I wanted to ask about how lorry drivers were regarded by the state, and she said, well, it's an unskilled job. Well, that's not true anymore, is it? Where do you have to have a special licence? Where do you have to have paper qualifications? Not to work in a warehouse, but you do to drive a truck. So there's a thought for you, and that I think is probably quite a nice thought for the day, isn't it? Let me get rid of a couple of bits and pieces off my sheet and see where we're going next, because I think we've kind of cracked it really for tonight. There we go. Oh my goodness, I've made muck up. But such is life. Do I care? No, I don't. I can manage this. This is what you call, I have to tell you, this is what you call busking television, because we make it up as we go along. We don't have the time. Yeah, exactly, Trevor. It is a skilled job. And it's a job in which knowledge counts as well, and the ability to deal with life on the trot. If you go into a warehouse, you clock in, you go out there, and you know your job. Every day is the same. You know what you've got to do. You go to wherever, pick up your dockets, whatever, go and make up your orders, pack your goods, whatever the hell you do, but you do the same thing every day. Whereas lorry drivers go out there, face something different every day. It's a different way of life. It's a life that places more demands upon the person than a truly unskilled job. So I think it's a point we need to make. This is no longer an unskilled job because the state itself is making demands on drivers. Okay. We can talk about that on Trucking TV any time. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Hey, everybody says, hooray, he's losing his voice, they all get. Then, yeah, lorry drivers are the backbone of any country, and without us, we would all be dead. Well, I think that's probably true, actually, isn't it? It's a bit of a one, that one. Okay, so, I'll just remind you of this one. Road transport crime reports. If you have a if you have a crime that takes place near to you, that happens to you, that happens to people you know, we want to know about it, and this is the place we want to know about it. Anybody can go on that site and see it. That includes the cops and that includes the tea leaves. So we'll know what you're up to, guys. There's an interesting one come up here from Andrew Mallia. How do you make this job appealing? It's not 9 to 5. You have to keep your qualifications up to date yourself, possibly have to sleep behind your desk. Sometimes stacking a shelf sounds appealing, but then I wouldn't see the country the way we do. I think that's deeply true. Chris Grindley, good morning to you. Have you only just woken up or have you been driving all day? Okay, so there we go. That's that one. And I have to tell you that, what are we doing now? Oh, I see. I nearly made a deadly mistake. But there you go. We'll now say that's enough for me for this evening. What are we going to look at? There we go. What we're going to look at tomorrow, I'm coming back to you tomorrow and it will be a slightly shorter programme. We'll have a few less things. We'll still do a live bit so you can get involved if you want to be. But I want to have a look. At a couple of things. There's been some interesting stuff come up about the famous Brexit. And there's all kinds of rubbish, I think, online about it. From people who maybe I think should know better. I don't know. What do you think? And excuse me. And I think some of the big guys make a lot of noise about stuff like that. And in actual fact, I think they should know better and start behaving themselves properly. Last time we had this Brexit thing 2 years ago, we were told a million lies by politicians who have a duty to tell us the truth. And I think it's happening all again. So there you go. Okay. This is Trucking TV and this is where you can find me. I was told earlier this afternoon that we suspect our phone number given on here is not right. If you've dialed it and found it wrong, then I do apologise. But you can get in touch with us. We'll check that and come back to it. We'll change it if it's wrong. Do that in time for tomorrow. But you can reach us anytime through Trucking TV's Facebook page. You can reach us anytime by our YouTube page. Don't forget, there's a huge stack of stuff on our YouTube page. If you're bored and want something to look at in the evening, you can always watch one of our video series about truck drivers, because that will make a change for you. It's like talking shop, isn't it, really? You can also reach us through Twitter. We have a Twitter account. And you can reach us anytime via, I think also there's an email address somewhere that maybe it's not on there, but there you go. But you can reach us at all those places, Facebook, YouTube, on the website and on Twitter. And you can try the phone number, and if it doesn't work, then it's my fault. Sorry about that. Okay, that, I believe, is us. So what I'll say to you is, I'm Chris, this is Trucking TV, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Take care and mind what you get up to.